This video is one more example of playing with data in MATLAB, and I will do this demo on an Excel file I have. So this data file contains some information from Nordic electricity market, and so it has the timestamps, so the dates, and then electricity spot price from Finland, then spot price from 2 Swedish areas, and then it has regulation price up and down. So this one means that electricity price within a given area can be on hourly basis regulated up or down based on demand and supply. And then we have some background information, so some temperature data and transmission capacities between the areas. So I'd like to get that data in. Let's try import data. My file was named hist data 2016 2, and of course I need to use the quote signs, and I have to give the extension, and that was an XLSX file. Alright, let's run it and see how do we get it in. Okay, so we have data itself, 13 columns and 1699 rows. Let's count. Yes, so all the data is in that matrix, and we also have text data and column headers, so these both are the same, so they basically carry the headers we had in the Excel originally, and they should be they are a cell array because the lengths of the texts may be different, but at least we have the variable list, for instance, if we want to do some plotting, and we can then use those column headers from here as ready names of the variables. Okay, and now, as I was telling you, some data files are big. This one wasn't so big, so the import from Excel didn't take that long. But some data files may be really large, and this import from Excel or from CSV takes quite a bit of time. So for that reason, once you've imported the data once, it's good to save it. So now when I say save, let's say electricity data. So now when I press enter, what MATLAB will do, it will save into that file, so it will create file electricity data, and it will save into it the content of my workspace. Now workspace has only one variable, and it's called X. If I had more variables here and I didn't want all of them, I could then type here specifically that I want X to be actually saved. Now it doesn't really matter whether I type this X or not, it will give the same results. So I save the data, and now I can remove this import from here, and all I need to do is load electricity data. So now I will first run the clearing. So you see the workspace gets empty, and then I run the load. So you see this variable here called X, which I had before, is still, appears again in the workspace because it has been saved in the data file. And then in your current folder somewhere, you can actually see this electricity data as a mat file. Okay, so now let's say I want to start from just plotting the data. And let's say I load this data first time, so I don't know what it contains. So once again, let's see, it has 13 columns of the data, and it has 13 column headers. So I will plot them like in 2 columns in subplots. So I'll make a figure. I will also, so that I don't have to type every time x.data, I'll call that just d. So I get out my numerical data from the structure, and then since I will need 13 subplots, I don't want to do them manually, so I will make a loop, and that will be from 1 to length of column headers. We can also make that actually, I call it nvar, so number of variables, so that I don't have to type that long name every time. So I'll use nvar here. Okay, and what I want to do is for every variable in here, I want to make a subplot for it. And now how do I arrange my subplots? As I said, I would like to arrange them in 2 columns. And so that I don't have to worry and count that, yeah, I would need actually 7 rows of plots if I have 13 variables and so on. I can make MATLAB do it for me. So I know that, remember that in subplot you kind of need to put in 3 things. First one is how many rows, second how many columns, last one is which one you are plotting at the time. The last one here is simple because since we are going through the variables one by one, that's the ith one that we want to be plotted. And actually, yes, from those we could actually omit the first one because it's just the date, so it's a bit silly to actually plot the date. So in that case I'll be plotting I-1 because in the first subplot I want second variable, second subplot third variable, and so on. Okay, I said I want a fixed amount of 2 columns, so that's clear as well. And now in here I want MATLAB to calculate for me. So I have n variables, but since I have 2 columns, so I divide it by 2 because that's the number of rows we would need. In case the number is odd, we round upwards, so we use ceiling. And since we actually took away the date from plotting, so we actually don't want all the variables, we want all but one, so that's why it's nvar -1. So here I have my subplot prepared. If this seems too difficult for you, then you can do that math yourself, so you would know actually that there were originally 13 variables. We take away 1, so that's 12 left, 2 columns. So you could simply type subplot 6, 2, and then I-1 in this case. But I like my codes to be prepared in such a way that they would work for any data that I have. So later, if I have another data set, I would like to do the same kind of plotting. All I need to do is change the data which is being loaded, and the rest of the code will adjust itself. Okay, and now what I want to plot that particular variable. So I know the variables are columns in my D matrix. So I plot the ith column. I'll make axis tight. And I want to know which one is which. So I will put the titles. And now I know that the title of my specific variable is in the ith element of this cell array x.callHeaders. So again, maybe just to save some typing, I'll define variables here. Oh yeah, here I maybe should have done it. If I called this nvar, this should be maybe the length already. But okay, maybe let's do it like this. So I don't call it nvar, I just call it var. So this actually stores the variables, because here then I refer to length of that. That's okay. So I know that it's variable var and its ith element, but since it's a cell array, I have to use those curly braces. So I put I in there, and then I have to end my loop. Okay, let's run and see if we crash or on anything. Undefined. Oh yeah, I had nvar here as well. Yeah, I have confused myself. nvar with actual list of variables. So I will maybe make nvar here after all, define it as length, length of var, and so I can use just nvar here, and I have nvar there, and then I have var. Yes. So you see, even simple codes can have some simple mistakes, but it's important that you can trace what has happened. So you see, it said here undefined functional variable nvar. Since for a while I had this nvar removed, so MATLAB didn't know what I actually meant. So now we run, and we get the plot. So we have our prices, and we have our temperatures in here, and we have transmission capacities. So this is basic example of plotting your data when you have set of variables. What else could be done in here? For instance, you would like maybe to see correlations of pairwise variables, and which correlations could be the most interesting. Maybe how much spot price is correlated with temperature. So that's our first and sixth variable. Remember that subplots are numbered in this way. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's a simple scatter plot figure. And the scatter plot can be either done using ready scatter function in MATLAB, and you give the two variables you want to be plotted. So in this case it's the first column and the sixth one. I forgot a comma in here, axis tight, and I'll run this. When you have a scatter plot like that, normally that means you want to probably verify level of correlation in your data. Oh yeah, I made a mistake now myself. So it wasn't first and sixth. Once again, first variable is actually the dates. So this should be actually second and seventh. How did I know? Because of the weird look of the plot, it couldn't be like that. But this, if you look at the numbers, this is how the dates are understood in MATLAB. So once again, run. Yes, now it makes a bit more sense. So we had the prices here and the temperatures here. And when you have scatter plot like this, as I was saying, most likely you would like to check the level of correlation between the variables, and maybe have that information in the plot. So first of all, I'll label, X label, these were spot prices, and Y label had temperatures. And then, so for instance, correlation, if you don't know a ready function, let's check correlation in here. Correlation coefficient between two antennas in an array. Let's try again. Okay, for instance, we have in here core coef returns matrix of correlation coefficients for A, where the columns of A represent random variables and the rows represent observations. Or so that's if you have a matrix of variables. Now we just want two specific variables, A and B. So this is that second and seventh column. So let's use that one. I'll call it C, core coef of these two. They are given individually with a comma in between. Let's see what that brings. Okay, so it actually anyway brings it as a matrix, but that means that on the diagonal we have the variables correlated with themselves, and then in here is the actual correlation coefficient between the two variables. So my coefficient, I'll call it like this, is actually from matrix C, for instance, first row, second, or I could use 2, 1 as well. So either this or this, it's symmetric, so it doesn't really matter. And I would like now that coef information to appear, let's say, in the title of my plot. So the title normally would be just a string, but I want that number included in there, so I will say correlation between and now we are combining an array of pieces of text. That's why I have to include the square brackets, and I'll be putting those pieces. So this is a fixed text. Then I'll add the names of the variables. So I will use var2 and var7 equals, let's call it C, and then we put here the numerical value. Now these I don't have to worry because they are strings, the names of the variables, but this number is not a string, so I have to convert that string to a the number to a string. So the trick was using num to string, for instance, and then I put that coef in there. So now in the title of my plot I should get that full text where var2, var7 and this numerical value of correlation coefficient should now be pieces of text. And you can see it in here. Correlation between elspot phi and temhel equals that.